Welcome to another FPL video. I'm going to be rating your teams ahead of game week 6, so thank you to everyone who sent them in, and remember, between each game week you can send me your teams with a clean cropped image on either Instagram or Twitter, and I'll have a look, and when the video is about, you will be featuring potentially in these videos, and I'll be discussing ways to improve the team, the things that are already good, and just some things that I think are probably glaring issues. But without further ado, let's head straight into the video. So the first team is sent in by Anzi, and there are some good things about it, but I think there are quite a lot of issues which could maybe result in a wildcard in a week or two's time. So Sanchez in goal is pretty fine, there's nothing really wrong with that, and I'm not really too bothered about the second goalkeeper, but I think the defence is the main issue here. So you've got Trent Alexander-Arnold, of course, he's one of the best defenders in the game. Livramento is arguably the best around his price, along with Shane Duffy, but you look at the rest and I just don't really see any sort of depth, and I think that you're going to struggle in some weeks, especially in the ones to come. And when you have a lot of people getting on Chelsea, City, and maybe even more Liverpool and United assets in defence, just having no one really from any of those teams, or even some decent kind of rotation options like Ben White or Marcel, I think it's going to cost you, because Manquillo isn't going to be reliable in the long term. Then you have Hoover and Williams. Really, you just want to have maybe Livramento and Duffy, but the rest you want to be maybe 4.4 million and over. And Ferran Torres has got very tough fixtures coming up, especially for the next 2 game weeks. And then after that, he's got a good run of games, but I think he's just far too much of a rotation risk. And when you couple that with the lack of defensive depth, I think that is going to be a big issue for you going forward. And then having to start Brownhill, who, by the way, right now is flagged with a dead leg. That's just not someone you want to be playing. He's someone you want to have on your bench, maybe second or third. He's not someone you want to be starting. And of course, you've also got Mendy. And really the main issue comes down to having both Ronaldo and Lukaku. And you can just have one of them. And from game week 7, 8 onwards, you can just downgrade Ronaldo to someone else and bring him back in place of Lukaku around game week 14 or 15. I don't think you have to have both of them, especially when it jeopardizes the rest of your team. But of course, there are some good things about it. You have Salah, you've got Jota, who is still one of the best options around his price despite his underperformance, and you've got Mikel Antonio, who is, in my opinion, the best striker in terms of value anyway at this moment in time. But I think there needs to be more depth, especially at the back, and Ferran Torres, you can downgrade him, and possibly Ronaldo around game week 7 or 8 to get more money, invest that into your midfield, maybe upgrade Brownhill and also your defence, which I think is the main issue. So that is what I would say. There's some good things about it, but definitely some things to work on in the future. The next team is sent in by Arya Mankumar, and this is probably the polar opposite of the first team. There's a lot of depth in this team, in my opinion, and there might be a lot of benching headaches, if anything, even at the back with Begovic and Sanchez, at least at this moment in time, with Pickford out. And this is a wildcard team, it looks like, and honestly, there would be a few changes I would make. So Trent Alexander-Arnold is fine. I think he should be good going into game week 6, and if not, definitely should be fine from game week 7 onwards. Rudiger is one of the best options in the game, so long as he starts, and he's going to be probably the most nailed Chelsea defender other than Azpilicueta. Marcel is still one of the best, around 4.6 million, despite Wolves being very disappointing from time to time. Trossard is a nice differential. He could be pretty good in some of these fixtures, but Brighton have some tough games coming up, so maybe you could invest in someone else. Even Rafinha, who is flagged at this moment in time, but I would prefer him long term than Trossard. Jota's good for the next few game weeks, but even then, Firmino's coming back to training very soon, and he's going to be featuring very soon. And Jota is just someone that, on a wild card, I'm just not too sure about bringing him in at this moment in time. Salah is a no-brainer. Gallagher is one of the best around his price, but maybe I would argue you could get him in around game week 9 onwards, or maybe game week 10, when Palace have a very good fixture run. At this moment in time, they still have some kind of tough fixtures coming up, so I'm not too sure. Ben White at 4.4 million. He's got Tottenham, but he's got very good fixtures up until game week 20, so I completely understand that. Sanchez is fine, and Livramento is probably the best around this price, along with Duffy, like I said earlier. And Ismaila Sarr, really good. I definitely wouldn't be benching him, by the way, and I would even bench Gallagher or someone else like Trossard rather than having Sarr on the bench. So definitely start Sarr. I mean, he's playing Newcastle after all, and I'm assuming you will have him in the starting 11. And say Maximan's an interesting choice for the next few game weeks, but long term, and I'm going to keep on saying this, it's just my opinion, I don't like him too much as an asset long term, but of course, he's been looking really impressive, and he's got the fixtures and even the underlying stats and FPL points to kind of back it up. So he is a decent choice. Ronaldo, you could even arguably captain him, which you are doing at this moment in time. It's between him and Salah. It's a really difficult one. Also Antonio, but I think the captaincy is actually a really good choice on your part. Ronaldo is what I'm going for at this moment in time. And yeah, Antonio is a great choice, especially with the next few game weeks in mind. So overall, it's a really good team. You could maybe downgrade one or two players. So maybe, for example, one of your midfielders like Trossard or Gallagher, you can just downgrade them to a 4.5 million option. Start Sarr, and then use that money to upgrade someone else like, say, Maximan or one of your other defenders. But overall, it's really good. You might have some benching headaches from time to time, but it's a really good team. This team is sent in by Ayush, and there are some interesting things about it. Having Alisson, who at this moment in time is the highest scoring goalkeeper in the game, and a double Liverpool defence with Matip, Shaw, Walker, Ayling, Rafinha, Salah as captain, Gallagher, Antonio, Lukaku and Ronaldo. And the bench is not too bad. You've got Foster, who's one of the best 4 million options, and you've got Davinson Sanchez, who is going to return from suspension, and he's actually playing in the Carabao Cup. But what I would do with this team, I would try to find more money, and I'd probably still downgrade Alisson. Despite how good he's been, I think you can find even better value in the Liverpool defence with Trent Alexander-Arnold. I just think with the attacking potential, for 1.5 million more than Alisson, I just think he's a better option. And Matip is not only kind of a rotation risk because he needs to be kind of wrapped up in cotton wool because he is injury prone, but that's the kind of big thing about him. He can get injured at any single moment. So I'm still kind of hesitant about Matip. Walker's a decent choice. I still prefer Cancelo or Diaz from the City defence. And I probably would look to get a Chelsea defender. Maybe Luke Shaw. You can move him on to Rudiger, Christensen or Alonso. Take your pick there. Ayling is a weak link. Not only is he an injury doubt, but Leeds are so poor defensively. So even if he is fit, he's not someone that you want to be starting most weeks. But overall, it's a good team. And Gallagher is one of the best around his price. He is not someone I'd be getting in at this moment in time, but of course you have him. I wouldn't be transferring him out with a fixture against Brighton, and it's a good team overall. Rafinha I like, Salah of course, Lukaku, Ronaldo and Antonio. So what I would be doing is getting Trent Alexander-Arnold if possible, or a Chelsea defender, probably taking money away from your goalkeeper. And if you need the money going down the line, maybe look from game week 8 onwards, you could downgrade Ronaldo to someone else and then use that money to spread the funds elsewhere. Now, there's not really any big reason to get rid of Ronaldo, but I just think at 12.5 million, when he's got so many tough fixtures and you're not going to be captaining him, is he worth that much money? Maybe not, but of course, he is doing so well and he could even score against some of these tougher teams on paper, and he is a great choice. So overall, it's a good team. I would just kind of make some adjustments to the defence and the goalkeeper to fully maximise your squad. The next team is sent in by Chris El Famoso, and a very interesting team. I have to say the 11 is very strong despite having Ronaldo, Lukaku, Salah and Trent Alexander-Arnold, and to be honest, it's a really good team. Obviously, there's not too much squad depth with Amati now losing his place. Allen, I just don't really rate anyway. He's just a 4.5 million bench fodder option. Obafemi has been transferred and he's really just there on your bench, so I completely understand that. And of course, you've got Steele to cover just in case Sanchez does miss out somehow. And look, in terms of improving this team, definitely Shaw to a Chelsea defender makes sense at some stage, maybe this game week, or I'd probably look towards game week 7 or 8. There's no real rush, I'd say. And I mean, overall, there's not really, I'd say, a big weak link. Jota in general, of course, has been underperforming greatly, and there are options like Sarr who could do really well over the next few game weeks, and then there's Rafinha who over a long period of time, maybe for the next 7-8 game weeks, can be a really good option for you. He could be an ideal kind of Gray or Benrahma replacement, so there's different things you can do there. I think Dyer and Soufal, you could maybe find better value elsewhere there too. So if I'm looking at weaknesses, it's probably the defence, but even then, Soufal's got attacking potential and Luke Shaw does too. It's just Dyer, I think, with Spurs being so poor at the back, especially in recent weeks where they've been kind of found out. Of course, they can improve. I'm going to expect Spurs to kind of tighten things up at the back, but still, you might find better value elsewhere, even if you move him on to a Ben White, for example, or maybe just a Livramento and then kind of upgrade the rest of your team. But what I would be doing, it depends how much money you have in the bank. Amati to Livramento would be a really good move, or Shane Duffy, take your pick. And of course, Ben White is another good option there too, around the kind of cheap price bracket. And Soufal, you could maybe move to a Christensen. Sure, you could move on to a Cancelo, Diaz, Marco Marcos Alonso or Rudiger, take your pick there as well. But the rest is pretty fine, to be honest. Once again, you can get Sarr or Rafinha in for Gray, Benrahma or Jota. Overall, though, that's a really good squad. And captaining Salah, I mean, he's got 50 points. He's the highest scoring player at this moment in time. And you can't really go wrong with either him or Ronaldo. That's a really good team overall. And if you manage to keep Ronaldo, and of course you already have Lukaku, and you get those Chelsea defenders in, I think you're pretty much ahead of the curve, and you don't need to wildcard if you haven't already. Now this one is sent in by Helmy, thank you very much, and in terms of Game Week 5, he actually did really well, got 90 points and had a Game Week rank of around 29k, so really impressive. Going forward, there are ways to improve this team, such as, of course, you're a bit unlucky here with Trent Alexander-Arnold missing out through illness and Bissouma had to come in for you. And Ivan Toney, despite his really impressive performance, he is someone that you probably don't want starting in some of these really tough fixtures coming up. But still, a really good team at this moment in time. I think Greenwood is probably one of the weakest links here. Of course, keep an eye on Rafinha's injury status. He does have a hip injury. Let's see how that develops. But I think Greenwood, since Ronaldo's arrival, he's regressed as an FPL asset and he can still do well. He's so clinical and he doesn't need too many chances to score. But he is someone that you probably could offload, maybe to an Ismaila Sarr, and then use that money to upgrade maybe one of your defenders or even Obafemi. But honestly, I'd probably be looking at upgrading Ivan Toney potentially if you can. For example, do Greenwood to Sarr and then Toney to Antonio. I think that could actually work out really well. Or if not, you could double up on Leeds attack and get Bamford in there. But of course, he's another injured out and we've got so many this week, believe me. But still, that's a good team overall. You've already got a Chelsea defender, which is really good. And you've got Mendy in goal, which is very expensive for a goalkeeper, but he's going to play the majority of the games and Chelsea keep so many clean sheets. He's going to get the occasional bonus and save points, so I can understand why you've gone for that. Van Dijk still, look, he's a good option. I prefer Trent Alexander-Arnold and maybe even a Cancelo, a Diaz or another Chelsea defender, but Van Dijk is a good choice. In terms of improving this team, probably Van Dijk to a Trent or one of those other names I mentioned, and also Greenwood to Sarr and perhaps Toney you could do to Antonio or Bamford, but still that's a really good team and yeah, I mean a very good score. Good luck with the future game week, same with everyone else who sent in their teams. This is what I was referring to in terms of how many players are flagged this week. Lilovac has 4 players who are yellow flagged at this moment in time, but I would expect the majority, if not all of them, to be available for Game Week 6. So that shouldn't be too much of an issue. You've got Sarr in there, you've got double Liverpool attack with Trent Alexander-Arnold, who should be fine. Sanchez and Foster, a very kind of, I'd say, template goalkeeper selection, just like I do. Veltman's at the back, Shaw, Soufal, Livramento. Honestly, this is a really good team overall. You've got a lot of depth in there. You've got Brownhill as your kind of set and forget bench fodder option, so you don't need to transfer him out even if he is missing this game week. Rafinha should be fine, same with Bamford, but of course let's wait and see what Bielsa says in the coming days. Honestly, in ways to improve this team, going forward, Jota, especially with Firmino coming back, he's someone you could maybe move down, but really, you've already got Rafinha and Sarr, who are probably 2 of the best options you can go for. Because if you look at Greenwood, Ferran Torres, who are looking really promising in the first few game weeks, just like Jota, their starting berth is under question and they're going to be rotated from time to time, especially with the Champions League coming back and more players returning for Manchester United, for Manchester City and for Liverpool. So it's a bit of a tricky situation. And what I would be suggesting once again, really, and it might sound boring, but get more Chelsea players. I think that is probably the biggest thing that's missing from your team. And I definitely prioritise their defence first. So maybe doing Luke Shaw to a Rudiger and then Soufal to Christensen. I'd do those 2 moves first and then maybe move Ronaldo to Lukaku around game week 8 or 9. There's no rush to get rid of Ronaldo in my opinion, and he can still do really well against Everton, and Southampton aren't too bad and they face Chelsea in game week 7, so you can just get on the Chelsea defenders first. But honestly, that's a really good team. There's not really too many weaknesses, but I'd probably get those Chelsea defenders in. You could even go for City defence. I think they are kind of overlooked even by me at this point in time. And then, yeah, get Lukaku up front. What we see on screen is Jose Retamal's team, and to be honest, it's pretty good. And you've got the bench fodder option there in Williams. I would prefer Duffy, maybe even Ben White or Livramento, but still, Williams is going to play. He's not really going to offer you too much value, and if you ever have a spare transfer, I would definitely recommend moving him to Livramento. I think that would make complete sense, and Livramento will keep more clean sheets, get more points, and possibly more attacking returns. That's just a little nitpick there. You've got Reece James, and look, I don't think he's as much of a rotation risk as people make him out to be. I think at one stage, Marcos Alonso could be rotated just as much, if not more, than Reece James at certain stages of the season. That doesn't mean, though, that I'm not concerned about Reece James. And if I'm ranking the kind of Chelsea defenders, Rudiger, Christensen and Marcos Alonso would be my top 3 right now, with Reece James in 4th. But so long as Reece James starts, he's arguably as good as those names I mentioned, if not better. The problem with him is if he's coming off the bench, getting 20-30 minutes and gives you a 1-pointer. Kieran Tierney, I mean, look, he's got attacking potential. He can create a lot of chances. I wouldn't be going for him over Ben White, for example, who's significantly cheaper, who's less injury prone, and who can also just get bonus points in general. With Tierney, I'm just not so sure. I think you could maybe move him on to Christensen, for example, and you've got enough money. You could even get Rudiger instead. You've got no Trent Alexander-Arnold. I mean, you don't have to have him. No one is essential, but in my opinion, he is the best defender in the game because Liverpool are looking really solid defensively, and he's got the assists, he's got the set pieces and everything that we all know that Trent can do. Semedo, of course, he's an interesting choice. I'd still keep him. Very good fixtures for Wolves, but I just don't really see Wolves kind of fulfilling their potential, especially with clean sheets. Traore, speaking of potential, this guy just completely underperforms, and he's always up there with the underlying stats, at least this season, but he's just someone that hasn't been delivering. In the future, I'd be a bit concerned about Torres, Traore and Jota, especially Torres and Traore right now. I'd probably be getting Sarr and Rafinha in for both of them, especially if Rafinha is fine. And you've already got Bamford, to be fair, Ronaldo and Antonio, so that's a really good forward line. Going forward, I'd probably get another Chelsea or City defender, and I'd probably be looking to do Ronaldo to Lukaku instead of breaking up your team, probably taking a lot of hits, and then having Ronaldo and Lukaku and maybe an imbalanced team in your situation. But overall, it's a good team. Also, Ferran Torres with those next 2 fixtures and the rotation risk, you can maybe move him onto Sarr and then use the rest of the money to upgrade all the others like Traore to Rafinha. I think that could be also another good move. But still, it's a good team and there are definitely some really good things about it and some nice differentials. Now, this team is sent in by Laser, and to be honest, I like the look of it. Despite having Williams and Livramento, I think you can get away with it at this moment in time anyway. And probably the same case as most of these teams. I think the lack of Chelsea is something, and it's also the case with my team, by the way. It's something that we probably want to rectify in the future. And you don't have to have Manchester City options, especially with the Pep Roulette that goes on there. But still, maybe a Cancelo or Diaz if you don't want to go double Chelsea defence. That's another thing you can do, of course. Let's wait and see what happens with Rafinha and Bamford and their injury situations. Going forward, I don't think Gray will be keeping up what he's been doing, but I definitely wouldn't be getting rid of him ahead of that Norwich fixture. And if Rafinha is declared out, I think a simple move from him to Ismaila Sarr makes complete sense, and you don't have to overthink that. Going into the future, Ronaldo to Lukaku, and then switching back to Ronaldo around game week 14-15 makes complete sense. But I think what I would be targeting right now is probably moving Luke Shaw and other defenders to all of those Chelsea defenders I've been mentioning throughout this video, and even Cancelo or Diaz, take your pick, because Manchester City actually have very good fixtures from game week 8 all the way up until game week 18, and they are fixture proof regardless. The problem is most of them aren't rotation proof, but that's just obviously another story. And Jota, he could also be someone to maybe make way in the future, but at this moment in time I think this team is looking solid. I think the double Leeds attack, despite them not really showing as much as they have been doing last season, they still have shown some signs like they did against Newcastle, and Bamford and Rafinha are still going to be 2 of their best assets this season. So overall, it's a good team. I'd just be looking to get more Chelsea players, to be honest, and just a few nitpicks here and there, but I think it's another solid team. This one is sent in by Lipok Yamir, and this is quite different, of course. Bruno Fernandes, we're not seeing him too often nowadays. I mean, who would have thought that at the beginning of the season? And Lipok was actually talking about taking Bruno out for Greenwood and then wildcarding after game week 6. Now, I honestly wouldn't do that because one, I mean, Bruno Fernandes is someone I talked about in my preview. He is one of my best captaincy shouts for the week, in my opinion. He's got a good record against them and he can still do really well. I wouldn't be getting rid of him ahead of this fixture. And also, Greenwood might not even start, and I think he's been more affected by Ronaldo coming into the side than Bruno has. I still think Bruno can get plenty of assists and the occasional goal. With Greenwood, though, I just think that what we've been seeing towards the end of last season and the beginning of this season, and being the focal point up front, and I just don't really see a place for Greenwood, so I would probably hold off that. And this is actually a really good team going into game week 6. Going into the future, of course, you can improve it with Chelsea defenders, and Luke Shaw is obviously kind of an ideal player to move off. And when you look at your defence, obviously Ayling, in my opinion, just doesn't cut it. I would even rather have Ben White or Shane Duffy or Livramento. And you do have that Brentford defender, and you can still just keep him. He's cheap. And once Brentford have better fixtures, at least around game week 10, then you can just put him into your side and you'll be fine. Same with Ivan Toney, but honestly, you might actually be tempted to either downgrade Bruno Fernandes in a week or two's time. Obviously, you might be wildcarding then anyway, and then using that money to upgrade Toney. Or you could always actually downgrade Toney to a 4.5 million striker and then invest that money elsewhere into your team. But really, the kind of big thing that stands out, obviously, is no Lukaku or Ronaldo. So if you are wildcarding in a week's or two's time, you could always kind of take a punt on a player like Gray and these kind of assets. But really, if you are not wildcarding or you're considering maybe just holding the chip and making free transfers, Chelsea defenders and City defenders are definitely something to improve your team. And I'd also make 2 free transfers potentially in game week 8 or 7 and get rid of Bruno Fernandes and get Lukaku up front. I think that would benefit your team enormously. And you can always get Rafinha in there or Demarai Gray, like I said, although you probably would want Demarai Gray ahead of Norwich rather than the fixtures preceding that. But still, it's a good team, but obviously up front, I think that is where, I wouldn't say you're lacking, but you want to invest your money away from your midfield a bit, take off Bruno Fernandes in a week or two's time, and then invest it into your forward line. But I wouldn't be getting rid of Bruno Fernandes ahead of Aston Villa. We're approaching the final few teams now. This is sent in by Tony, and there's some very interesting picks in there. I mean, Gabriel Jesus, Diaz, not every day that you see both of these kind of options in here. And look, there's actually some things that I really like about this team, such as Salah, Trent Alexander-Arnold, of course, Diaz himself, even Jota to an extent. I think he's just been very unlucky, just hasn't performed, and Cristiano Ronaldo. But when you look at this team, there are definitely ways to improve it. I think Douglas Luiz is someone you don't want to be starting in most weeks. I'd even rather start Livramento over him. And Soucek as well. He was a really good asset last season. I don't see him continuing that this campaign. Of course, I could be wrong. Greenwood as well. I just don't think he's as good of an asset now as he was beforehand. And even though I like Gabriel Jesus as a differential in some game weeks, I don't like the rotation risk surrounding him. So what I would be doing with this team is moving Gabriel Jesus on to another striker. So maybe Antonio or Bamford. Take your pick there. Raul Jimenez is still a good choice as well, by the way. And I'd also kind of take funds from certain areas and then redistribute that across your team. So Greenwood, you can move him on to Sarr. I'm not sure how many free transfers you have this week, but if you have 2, I'd definitely be moving on Greenwood and maybe Gabriel Jesus on for those sorts of names. So Sarr could be coming in for you, and if not, Rafinha if you want someone a bit more long term. But overall, you can do Greenwood to Sarr and then upgrade Soucek, I'd say, to Rafinha, so get both of them in. Douglas Luiz can just be a bench fodder option for you and you don't have to worry about him. And then I'd upgrade Johnson to another player. Livramento is fine as your 5th defender, but using those funds to upgrade Johnson as well will give you more depth. And also, if you need money, you can downgrade Mendy to a Sanchez or Jose Sarr. I know Mendy and Chelsea defence is so good, but you probably would rather have their defensive assets, even Reece James, Christensen, Rudiger, Alonso. We've been through it all video. I'd rather have them and maybe a double up than having Mendy, who's very expensive for a goalkeeper and considering your team's situation. So I'd take money out from certain positions and players and then spread it across the rest of your team. But obviously it's got some promise, you've got potential, but some players like Douglas Luiz and Soucek I just wouldn't be starting in most weeks. Into the penultimate team, we've got Top Lad. That is his name, by the way, or at least the username that was sent in. And I like this team. I still like Semedo, despite obviously him looking really poor in Game Week 5. Same with all of Wolves, really. And Traore, of course, he can deliver. It's just a question of when. And do you want to keep waiting about for that to happen? I'm not so sure. I would actually still move him on to Sarr or Rafinha personally, and Benrahma is good for the next 2 game weeks, and then you can get one of those that you don't get in. So if you get Sarr in for Traore, you can then get Rafinha in for Benrahma in maybe 2 or 3 game weeks time. That will be completely, I'd say, a good thing to do. But also, obviously, Chelsea and City, I would get one of the defensive cover in for Luke Shaw. I think that just makes sense. They're much better defences than Manchester United. And of course, keep an eye on Jota and Firmino coming back. He's another one that you could ultimately replace. And Ronaldo to Lukaku, I think makes complete sense. But you don't have to rush that because Ronaldo can easily keep up with Lukaku in the next few game weeks. Just make sure you have the Belgian probably ahead of that Norwich fixture very soon. I think that's where you really want to not go without him. But overall, that's a good team. I like your attack a lot, to be honest. But of course, Lukaku has really good fixtures coming up. Ronaldo and Manchester United have very poor ones. And the reason why I'm inclined to downgrade Ronaldo to Lukaku is because for 12.6, 12.7 million, you don't want to be captaining a player like that. And if you're not, then why do you have a player that expensive in your squad when you're not even going to be considering him from the captaincy that much in most of these game weeks? But overall, it's a really good squad. I'd just be getting more Chelsea players. I'd probably get a Sarr or Rafinha. And I'm just personally never been a lover of Traore, and I just hate these kind of players who underperform so much. And Jota's another one at this moment in time, but I'd rather keep him over Traore. And finally, we have Tyrone Butler, and this is a good team. Once again, I mean, all of these teams are good. Of course, there are weaknesses in all of them. Same with my one, and there is no such thing as a perfect team. Sanchez in goal is fine. Sure, of course, he's someone who can do well for the next 2 game weeks, but I would be getting rid of him after, despite the fact that I think Manchester United will probably tighten up at the back in these tougher games and be more conservative. I still think you can find better value with Chelsea defenders who might even offer more attacking potential like Marcos Alonso or the Manchester City players, and that's pretty much kind of a recurring theme throughout this video. Cody's fine, of course. He's not really the ideal Wolves player. I went with him too, but still he can tick along nicely over the next few game weeks. You've got Ben White and Ayling, so you've got a lot of defensive depth here, I would say. What you could do actually, with Ayling being an injury doubt and also just Leeds being so poor defensively, you could actually just downgrade him to Duffy or Livramento and then use those extra funds to maybe rectify other areas. I think Ivan Toney, if you are willing to stick with him, you could maybe just wait up until game week 10 or 11, bench him from some of these game weeks coming up, and then play him when he faces 3 of the worst defensive sides so far this season. But will you be willing to wait that much with Ivan Toney? I'm not so sure. You've already got Sarr in, which is really good. He can do exceptionally well this week, just like he did last time. I think Greenwood is probably the biggest weak link in your midfield, considering how he has been playing and how he has been performing from an FPL perspective since Ronaldo has come in. So you could move him on to Rafinha if he is declared fit. He is a good option for the medium to long term, so that's completely fine. Keep an eye on Jota once again with Firmino coming back. Antonio is still good, even with some of those tougher fixtures coming up. Ronaldo, you can move on to Lukaku. But yeah, I think Chelsea defence or City is what I'd be going for in the defence. And Greenwood is probably the biggest weak link there. And Sissoko is fine as a 4.5 million option. I wouldn't really pay too much attention there. I would keep Ben White. I would probably move Ayling on. Ivan Toney's another one, and Greenwood. Other than that, this team is good. And thank you very much to everyone who sent in their teams. Really appreciate it. And obviously, it's a lot of fun actually going through these. And it does give me some ideas for my own team. And of course, Chelsea defense, Chelsea attack is the way to go in my opinion. There are some people kind of clamoring for Mason Mount and Kai Havertz. They could still be good options from time to time. But in my opinion, going for double Chelsea defense and Lukaku is the ideal Chelsea triple up. Let me know what you think of all of these teams down in the comment section below. And was I being too harsh with some of them? Was I maybe not being harsh enough on some? Let me know what you think of my analysis too. Of course, I can improve as well. And this is something I tend to do also in the live stream. So if you put your kind of teams and comments and ideas in the live chat, I'll also be responding to you there. I look forward to seeing you for the deadline and reaction streams for FPL. Same with the UCL fantasy streams that are coming about. And if you enjoyed this video, smash the like button and subscribe if you're new around here. Appreciate all the support. And you can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram, Dylan_RCM. I'm active on those platforms, and those are the applications or formats where you can actually send in your teams. If you send a clean cropped image through a direct message if you want, I can then use them in a future video and I can analyze your team. Of course, I try to be respectful, and I definitely don't, think any team is bad per se or really bad. At least that's the case most of the time. But there are ways to improve every single team, especially looking at future fixtures, forms, underlying stats. There are so many things that come into play. But of course, I could be wrong about some of these. If you have a gut feeling about a certain player, I say, for example, take Traore out, or that's what I would do. You don't have to do that, because honestly, sometimes patience is the best thing to do, and there's a reason why you made those decisions and brought those players in. But thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.